and just an extraordinary time to have you there and address not only the president and the senior leadership there, but also the many, many students who came, and the recordings that were made of that event were just shared widely. So I wanted to tell you and thank you for your time and energy.
I'll be in touch with you and your brother in a few weeks, because I have an idea of really an international conversation about our times between different indigenous cultures from different perspectives.
Fabulous.
Because, you know, it's like colonialism is on fast forward and we don't exist, you know, and our thinking doesn't exist and our knowledge doesn't exist. So I want to just trigger that dialogue, and I'll be ready in a few weeks, and then I'll send to you, and then you can discuss it in whatever process works for the indigenous communities in Canada and even in the Americas.
Mm-hmm.
I think we could have something interesting come out of it. Yeah.
Well, I think so. Just recently on World Unity Week, there was an Indigenous prayer that began at sunrise on the international dateline and began in Australia and went from the Indigenous peoples of Australia all across the world, the Indigenous peoples of the Philippines, and it ended up here in North America. So many, many Indigenous spiritual leaders on there. The network's already been formed. We can tap into that network.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, I'll be ready in a few weeks.
Okay.
And because I think the colonizing world needs help. You know, kind of narrow their focus so much they can't see. They can't even see up to their nose anymore. They don't even think they have a nose.
Well, I think that's why the economics piece is so critical, because people have taken that on as their major colonial identity and have done so for thousands of years. It's not working anymore. That whole system and the empire is crumbling. Now it's time for us to fill that void with Indigenous economics, Indigenous education, Indigenous health. Not to say that it's all got to be Indigenous, but it has to be Indigenous inspired for the changes.
Absolutely. Because you see, the economy of colonialism did not create an economy, it created theft. So you want to look at economy, it has to be in indigenous cultures, because that's where authentic living was happening.
Yes.
After that, it was theft. Theft of land, theft of wealth, only theft.
Yeah.
Named economy, named technology, all kinds of sophistication. Well, that's interesting, because I would have done in March, but because of the lockdown, I'm also going to be working with the Navania network, and we would love to have some indigenous people involved on economies of care, you know, the new economies.
Well, that is a beautiful segue to that. Sue Chiblow has just joined us from Garden River. We are now at 9:30. I'm going to just let Sue say her hellos to her co-teachers for this teaching circle. I'm saying hello also to Bryson, who has joined us from out east, a wonderful voice on Twitter for all of these things, mask maker extraordinaire under COVID and 100 other reasons. I see some other folks have joined us, but Sue, I'm going to let you just say a quick hello to your friends, and in 2 minutes, we'll round this up and we'll get started into the official program.
All right, Ani, bonjour. Ogaman Kwaya Dishnikas to Chuck Dodo, Kitagonzi B. Dunjaba, Hanishnave Koyo Dao. So my English name is Sue Chiblow, and I want to first thank you for inviting me to be part of this important conversation and say hello to everybody who's participating and watching. So, be what?
Hello, Sue. This is Vandana Shiva.
Good morning, Sue. It's Diane Longboat, Kahontakwas.
Good morning.
Good to see you.
So for those folks just joining us, here we are, finally at our teaching circle that has moved to Zoom. I want to start by thanking Vandana Ji and Diane and Sue for taking their time out today and bringing their wisdom, love, and leadership to this conversation. I was introduced to this particular collective of these three women a number of summers ago. I had the pleasure of hosting Vandana in Ontario for a short tour, and the pardon me, the Traditional Ecological Knowledge Elders Group of the Robinson Huron Treaty Territory had asked Diane to set up a meeting with Vandana at the Chiefs of Ontario office, and that was where we all first sat in circle together, and some actions were called into. We had a chance to connect last year again at the Parliament of World Religions. Our young friend Rachel Parent had an opportunity to interview Sue and Vandana. So this conversation we're having now is our COVID pivot from what was supposed to be the third Art of Resistance tour. We were going to tour the country with a hip hop act and the Beehive Collective, touching down with Vandana in a few locations, including one in the Robinson Huron Treaty Territory, in which we had planned an elders and youth circle where these conversations could happen. And since the travel ban, and we don't know that we will, or when we will be able to sit together, we decided to use this technology to bring these teachings and record them so we can share them throughout the Robinson Huron Treaty Territory over the next while, but also in recognition of the fact that the Tech Elders Group struggle is all of our struggle, and that there are echoes in that struggle in the other work that we're all here to do. And so this conversation is an opportunity for a few things to happen. First, we're going to, when I'm done doing the agenda, I'm going to hand the floor to Diane to open this teaching circle in a good way. First, I want to acknowledge that all of us where we are sitting are in unceded traditional territory of someone, because when you are presented with a crappy agreement, you cannot cede what you don't understand. And so we should all be acting like none of the treaties signed, certainly in the land we call Canada, have any bearing. But I would invite folks on the Zoom and as well as on the live chat to please type in the traditional territory in which you now are occupying, and any additional information that you would like others who are here together, because we are a teaching circle, and let's take advantage of the fact that many of us are going to multitask anyway. So I'd rather you're multitasking into the discussion. So an invitation both in the Zoom and live chat to enter your territory. So after the opening circle, I'm going to invite Sue to spend 10 minutes to just give us a background and an update on where the Tech Elders Group is at in their struggle and their legal struggle to reclaim management of their territories. I'm not going to eulogize or biographicalize the three speakers. I'm hoping that you will use your Google machine or whatever search engine you're using to find out a little bit more about our speakers. Suffice to say that part of my excitement about having Sue on this call is she's a real leader across Turtle Island on this conversation of Indigenous law and governance and what it really is to have an economy and the inseparability of spirit from matter in a real way. And so really excited for that contribution, Sue, that you have to add beyond the support you're doing with Tech Elders Group, really how that's a call into supporting the deeper actions. So without any further chat on my part, I'm going to hand the floor over to Diane, and then I will walk us through the three speakers will each take 10 minutes to orient ourselves, and then we'll have another hour for discussion. As folks heard who may have joined the call a little early, this discussion is going to happen without a whole lot of need for moderation. If I'm putting my hand up or interjecting, it's because we have a really great thought or question from the floor. So without further ado, Diane, I'm going to hand the floor over to you, Miigwech. Nyawan.
There you go. Kahontakwas, Inyats. My Mohawk name is Kahontakwas, and I'm delighted to be with you today. I am Mohawk and Turtle Clan from 6 Nations in the Grand River Territory. And he's asked me to offer some words of thanksgiving this day to bring our hearts and minds together. Because since COVID happened, and actually prior to COVID, there's been so much disruption of spirit, of heart, of mind, and body, that these words are important to collectively center up the work that we have in front of us today. You'll see on the screen that I'm burning some medicine, and I'm going to actually smudge you. And you know, it doesn't matter when you use medicine and prayer and ceremony, the time and the distance, it means nothing. And so, you know, I offer this medicine to you. And these words I'm going to offer on behalf of all of us. Yahweh, Sangwe, Disang, Ganalunqua, Kahontakwas, Inyats. Thank you, Creator, for this beautiful day, for the gift of life for one more day, for the health and the well-being of ourselves and our families and our communities. This day, Sangwe, Disang, we are mindful of all of the people of the world, the many faith traditions, the cultures, the geographical homelands, the beautiful places that people are situated throughout the world, the land that has manifested in the cultures, the languages, and the faith traditions of the people. We are grateful for the great diversity of human life and how we are, as the flowers in your garden, all flowers, but many different, with different colors and scents, and yet, you know, such beauty in the human family. We give thanks this day for the vision that you had to travel about the universe and to collect the most beautiful dusts and pollens from the places of magnificence, to swirl them all together and to create this place in your vision that you say is the gem of the universe we call Mother Earth. Upon those waters of the earth are great ones, salt waters, fresh waters, rain waters, and birth waters. We give thanks to those great waters of the earth for the life-giving force that they have. We honor also that great council of creation, the plant life that is the oldest form of life upon the earth, the ones that we turn to for our medicines in these times of great trauma and great need. Those medicines restore us, build our immune systems, and keep us happy, well, and at peace. We give thanks to all of the medicine plants. The strawberry in our area is the lead of all of those medicine plants, and we have had our ceremony for honoring the strawberry. We give thanks for the standing tree people, the maple tree here, that gives us medicines to cleanse our bodies in the spring and to help us to taste that sweetness of life. We give thanks and honor to all of the medicine plants that are used in ceremonies, the tobacco, the sacred tobacco, as the lead of all of those medicine plants, of sage and cedar and sweetgrass and onanolo. Many, many medicine plants used for smudging, for prayer, for offerings. We give thanks for all of them. This day, Sangwe Disang, we are mindful that we have relatives in this natural world, all of those beings in the animal life. And in our area, the deer is the lead of all of those animals, the chief. We give thanks to all of the living beings that are in the waters, the grandmother and the grandfather turtle, and to those living beings that are in the air, and the grandmother and grandfather eagle. Of all of those beautiful ones in that council of creation, they all have their relationships, their duties, and their responsibilities that they fulfill for the Creator. We are mindful that we are brothers and sisters to them. We acknowledge the 4 winds, the grandfather winds that are cleansing and refreshing the earth. And we are mindful that soon the thunder beings will come and they will clean the air, the land, and the water with the rains that they will bring and the lightning that will come from their eyes. We thank those great ones, great teachers that the Creator put in place to watch over us, who have been lowered here from time to time to remind us of the sacredness of life, to remind us of respecting and honoring one another, to remind us of giving thanks. We honor all of those teachers that have walked among us. We are grateful this day for the stars that represent our ancestors, for the grandmother moon who watches over the female life and the fertility and the coming of new life, for she is the one who marks her cycle with 13 moons in a full year and 28 days in a month cycle. We give thanks and honor to our grandfather, the sun, whose light brings life to the world, who never fails in his walk across the sky each day, and reminds us as human beings, we must understand our sacred duties and never fail in fulfilling those duties. We give thanks for that beautiful bridge called the Milky Way that joins the natural world to that place of peace where we all originated. One day, our bodies will restore and feed our Mother the Earth, who fed us for many years. And our souls will walk across that bridge to that place of peace. We will see the fires of our ancestors that are burning there. And in those beautiful fires, we will hear their prayers, their songs for us, bringing us dream and vision and sacred guidance for the way forward. The Creator's council fire is also burning in that place of peace, and the great ones are seated there, the ones who helped the Creator complete the job of creation here upon the earth, the great healers, the great teachers, the great ones that have brought us stories and meaning of our lives throughout our cultures on Turtle Island. We give thanks and honor to the Creator for bringing us together this day, for keeping us well and at peace, and our families, our partners, our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, for supporting this great work as it moves forward and opening doors and opportunities for us that we never had before. So with these words, Songwe Dison, our Creator, I give thanks this day, and I ask that if there's anything that I left out, that I do a better job the next time, and that all of the people who are listening, please add your prayers to my prayers so that we can be a unified council throughout creation, throughout the world. I give thanks this day on behalf of all of us, all of my brothers and sisters. Yawa, miigwech. Thank you.
Yawan, miigwech. Thank you so much, Diane. Sue, I'm going to hand the floor over to you for the next 10 minutes or so. If you want to share with us what you would like folks directly on this call, but more broadly, since we're recording, other folks within the Anishinaabe Nation and across Turtle Island up to speed on the Tech Elders conversation. Thank you.
All right, first I want to thank Diane for those beautiful words that remind us of who we are. And what our responsibilities here are on this beautiful planet, this earth. Before I get into who and a little bit of history of the TK Elders, I just wanted to share this morning, I made my offering and I gave thanks and I asked my ancestors, my spirit helpers, all those beings out there, you know, what can I say? Because I am just, I'm a shakabi, I'm a helper. I try to help where I can and when I'm asked. So when I made that offering, I could hear the birds singing and I could see the little beings swimming in the water and I could see the spider web from one plant leaf to the other plant leaf. And I could see the elm tree and these trees that are sitting by the water. And what came to my mind was of how all of these beings are living their responsibilities that they were given and how they are working together. I was reminded of a teaching that was shared with me by Sherry Copenance, who said she received that teaching from one of her elders, and how she talked about when you look into the forest, you look into the bush, and you see these different trees. You see a spruce tree and a maple tree and a birch tree, and you don't see them kicking each other out of the bush. You see them actually working together and helping one another. And that's what was reminded to me when I made that offering. And I think it also speaks to who I am supposed to be, who I am meant to be and that is that helper to bring these beautiful minds together to help solve these problems that have been forced upon us. And one of them is, of course, the Tiki elders. This is what they call themselves, the traditional ecological knowledge elders of the Robinson Huron Treaty Territory, to which there are 21 First Nations. And it all started, well, for me, it started in 2008. I was employed as the environmental director for the Chiefs of Ontario. And I was approached by a few chiefs from the Treaty 3 territory who had informed me of the herbicide spraying that was happening up in their territory. And they asked me to assist them to draft a resolution to demand a moratorium on this. So this is when I became aware of this destructive practice, this poisoning of our lands by the government in 2008. And I had left the Chiefs of Ontario, and I was doing work with other First Nation communities. And I had one day stopped in to see Elder Willie Pine in Mississauga First Nation, just to see how he was doing. And, you know, we had our conversation. I asked him how he was doing, and he asked me, well, what are you up to, Chiblow? And I said, well, you know, not really anything, you know, just kind of hanging around. And he told me then, he says, well, good, since you're not doing nothing, I need you to do something. I need you to help us. And so I took that responsibility, but also as a lesson to myself to never tell an elder that you're not doing nothing, because then they're going to give you stuff to do. So I worked with Willie, and that was in and around late 2014 that he'd asked me to help them, because they, Elder Raymond Owl, who's from Sagamok, the Anishinaabe of Sagamok, in the treaty territory, they're right on Lake, North Shore of Lake Huron. He had met with Willie, and they had started discussing how this herbicide spraying came to be, the damage that it's doing, and how we can actually stop it. So they had invited me to assist them in pretty much coordinating meetings, taking notes, providing letters. And what they did was in 2014, they drafted a resolution themselves stating that they wanted a moratorium on the herbicide spraying that's happening in forestry operations up in our territory until we can take a look at the amount of damage that has caused. So we drafted a letter to the different levels of government at that time, sent letters in, and were pretty much ignored. From there, what they did was we hosted a series of demonstrations in 2015. So we had asked each of the First Nation communities in the territory to do an awareness campaign, and the highways run through the majority of our communities. So they did an awareness campaign introducing that this herbicide is happening in our territories, and the elders believe that the amount of damage that this is causing, it's hurting the bees, it's hurting the water, it's hurting the moose, it's hurting all of the beings. And so what they did was they started this demonstration to increase an awareness. And then in 2015, we coordinated a demonstration on Parliament Hill to create an awareness, but also to inform the federal government, particularly the Department of Health, because they're the ones that actually allow the different chemicals into Canada. They're the ones who make the decision on what chemical can come into Canada. And we wanted to create an awareness with them, advising them that we wanted this moratorium and that we were never consulted on this chemical being in our territory. So that happened. More letters went off. We received letters back. Pretty much after these demonstrations, we created an awareness that, you know, they use these in forest management plans, that it's not dangerous, you know, all of their Western science to try and back up why their decision was made. So in 2016, what we coordinated then was the elders went to what is Queen's Park, which is the Ontario provincial legislation, to also create an awareness, because Health Canada says, well, we just let it in, but then the Ministry of Natural Resources, which is now called the Ministry of Natural Resources or and forestry are the ones that actually allow the companies and give them the license to spray this herbicide. So, of course, being passed around from one level of government to the other level of government and not really receiving any substantial letters, and our requests for meetings with them were pretty much ignored. So they did this demonstration on Queen's Park and created a huge awareness within the, I suppose, the southern communities to let them know what's going on in our territory. And that was a very successful demonstration, because shortly after that, the Ministry of Natural Resources met with us and pretty much came with a predetermined outcome, came with predetermined speeches, predetermined recommendations, because everything and anything that the elders said were dismissed. So obviously the frustrations levels rose, and at that time we had started working with Stephen O'Neill, who is a former judge and now is a lawyer again, bringing awareness to him on what was going on with the elders and the frustration that they were feeling. But I also want to acknowledge Dorothy Schreiber, because she's also too been a helper and helping with drafting a lot of the documents for the elders. So in 2018, in the Robinson Huron Treaty Territory, the chiefs have a meeting. All of the chiefs get together. So we drafted what's called a Chinishnabin Kidwin, which is a declaration and a resolution. And in 2017, we brought that to the chiefs to present to them what was going on, what the elders were trying to do, and get their support. All of the First Nations signed on to that. And in the beginning of that declaration, it talks about, you know, when we talk about Anishinaabe governance and Anishinaabe law, and in that beginning, we always remind the settler government and peoples and even ourselves that, you know, the Creator is the one who put us here. We didn't come over in a boat. We didn't fly over. We were put here by the Creator as Anishinaabe people on this specific territory. And that when the Creator put us here, He gave us our responsibilities. He gave us our instructions, and He gave us our responsibilities to the lands. And in the English language, that's been transcribed into an actual right. But when you talk with fluent language speakers, they talk about how that word right isn't even in our language. It's a responsibility. So this is part of that whole Anishinaabe government. So we talked about how, you know, we were put here by the Creator. We have our responsibilities. We had our own governance structures. We had a way of dealing with any type of conflict. We had all of these processes in place. And this is all part of reminding government and ourselves of who we are, so that when they come to make their laws or do their forestry management plans or do whatever they feel that they need to do, we remind them that we were here first, we're governing ourselves, and that we have knowledge systems that can assist them if they choose to actually listen to us. So in 2017, that was signed, that was sent off to all the levels of the government again, reminding them that we wanted this moratorium. Well, here we are in 2020. We've pretty much been ignored, but a few months ago, we were contacted by one of the smaller forestry operations that's happening in our territory, because one of the First Nations communities put in what's called a bump up request on an environmental assessment. And so the forestry company their business was halted. So they contacted us because they thought that the TK elders had put this in. So we had a conversation with them. We invited more forestry companies to join in with us and to talk about how we can help one another, how they can still have economic gain, but how we can still make sure that the forest is sustainable and is being managed safely, so that, you know, as Anishinaabe people, the elders always remind me that the forest is our pharmacy, it's our kitchen, it's our grocery store, it's all of these things. This is our home, and the importance of making sure that when we need our medicines, we can go in and get our medicines and trust that they are safe and that they have not been contaminated. So in these forestry companies, we sent them a letter inviting all of the forestry companies in the area to meet with us to talk about that. And because some of the smaller forestry companies that are family owned are actually starting to understand, and they're actually starting to see the damage that's being caused. Unfortunately, the big corporation, forestry company, refused to meet with us because they had met with us in 2018. And when we had talked about the herbicide spraying that's happening, we were pretty much told by them that no, they're not going to stop. We questioned why they aren't doing the type of same forestry management in Quebec, but they're doing it in Ontario. And again, we're pretty much, she pretty much told us, no, I'm sorry, but we are not going to stop. We've been issued a license by the government, and that is our right to be able to use that chemical, that herbicide, in ensuring that one specific plant grows. So just killing off diversity. And since then, we've sent out, we've consulted with Stephen O'Neill, and he's now with Nalgabo on Manitoulin Island, and we've consulted with him. We've drafted information. Prior to COVID, Ray and I had met with some of the First Nation communities to give them a legal action plan on what exactly is going on. Now that COVID hit, we've only been able to meet with a couple communities since that lockdown in the First Nation communities. But what we've done is an interim measure is that we've sent another letter to the provincial government reminding them that we are here from the Creator and that we want to have a meeting with them to help them understand the damage that they're doing and to come to a resolution on how we can use different types of forest management practices without actually poisoning the land. So this is where we're at right now. We haven't, we gave them a deadline to respond to us, and so far we haven't heard back from them, but I do believe that deadline is approaching within a week or so. And if we do not hear back from them, then unfortunately, we will have to take legal action inside their court systems, under their laws and under their justice system. So we just, as a community member in my community, I received the notice that north of my community, they're going to be doing herbicide spraying again. And in the past, we've talked about occupying those spaces so that they can't spray, because they're not supposed to spray if there's human beings in the area. But again, due to COVID, we're being somewhat constrained on how we can coordinate those types of activities. And yeah, so that's pretty much where we are right now. We're waiting to hear back from the government, and the whole court, the legal action would be based on the lack of consultation on how they've affected our treaty rights to be able to access the lands in terms of picking or harvesting our medicines, harvesting the animals, the plants, and all of these other things. Miigwech.
Miigwech, Sue. That's a lot of information you packed into 10 minutes, and I hope that folks listening understand that every one of those actions were accompanied by elders out of their own pocket having to figure out how to get to meetings, how to communicate with each other, dealing in a governance system where the chief and council is changed over every 2 years. And by the time you educate your local community, you might be dealing with someone new, and all of these issues stacked one on top of the other to fall on deaf ears, and have these folks who rightfully in their elder years ought to be spending time with community and work, transmitting language and teachings, are having to go to an occupying government to just ask for the very basic respect for survival is a very intense thing. And so, Sue, I appreciate that when you're speaking to this, you're also speaking about something that's very deeply affecting people that you love and care for, and it's affecting your ability to function as a people. And so I honor that there's a lot of emotional work that comes with sharing these stories as well. It's not just a tale of what's happening in the news. So again, thank you and honor for that. Vandana Ji, I'm going to hand the floor over to you and let you maybe speak over the next 10 minutes as to your involvement with this group and just any reflections you have or what you're motivated to share based on Sue's sharing. Thanks.
Thank you, Diana, for a beautiful prayer. And thank you, Sue, for the update on the glyphosate Roundup issue in the indigenous territories and the struggle of the traditional ecological knowledge elders. I'm very happy I was able to have the meeting with them. Was very, very happy to meet again with Diana. And while I was listening to both Diana and Sue, I was thinking of the two worlds, yeah? This world which realizes we've been put here by creation to take care of creation. And that wisdom is what the traditional ecological knowledge elders, the tech elders, carry. And then there's another colonizing world, which is the tech world, T-E-C-K, which has been bringing products like Roundup, whose only objective is to destroy life. And absolute. So you have an anti-creation product coming out of a mind that we are the masters, we are the conquerors, and anything living comes in our way of conquest and we must exterminate. That is at the root of colonialism. That is at the root of the violence done to indigenous people everywhere, violence done in India. And I will speak a little bit about how it is time to connect the different movements of decolonization, both in space and in time. But what is the Roundup culture? You know, I first heard of Roundup in the negotiations of the Convention on Biological Diversity. And here was the Roundup, the Monsanto representative talking about how we couldn't have a biosafety law because it would come in the way of their new technologies, including GMO Roundup resistant seeds. And he, I think it was the president of or vice president of Monsanto. And he said, these are smart technologies that prevent the seeds from stealing the sunshine. And when Sue talked about the forest being the pharmacy, the forest being the grocery, each of those sources of healing and nourishment is defined as a weed that must be removed. Because in the monoculture of the mind, as I've written in my book, everything else but what is commercially exploitable is useless. You look at forestry texts, they talk about, oh, all that biodiversity is just weeds because you can't extract it. So colonialism gives rise to extractivism. Well, let me go back one step. Colonialism is basically commerce only, profits only, trade only. Every colonizing company, including the East India Company, was a trading company. Their main job was to trade, but not in fair ways, not in just ways, but through war, through violence, through taking over the land, through exterminating the original inhabitants. And therefore, there had to be militarism, there had to be extractivism, and there had to be a monoculture of the mind and a mechanical mind. When I'm listening to Sue talk about the tech elders, I'm just thinking, I'm looking a lot at where the post-COVID world is being taken. First of all, how did we come to the COVID world? I have a book called Oneness versus 1%, And there will be a new edition with a new epilogue, which connects to how we got to the COVID world. But it's basically invasions into forests. On the one hand, by an agribusiness system that is hugely inefficient, can't work on the same piece of land. In my country, farmers have been on the same 2 acres of land, farming and leaving it better because your duty to care for the earth makes you leave a more fertile soil rather than a desertified soil. So no indigenous culture has had to invade for its food other people's territory. But the GMO soya, the Roundup Ready soya empire, is having to burn the Amazon. It's having to destroy Argentina. Not only because for every GMO seed sold, Monsanto collects a royalty, which is the biggest source of profits in today's time, patents and royalties. But even more importantly, because they establish a soya empire and get rid of food. So one of the things all of us from indigenous cultures will have to do is, of course, remember our foods, defend our foods with love, and prevent the dumping of fake food. Done a whole new analysis of a GMO Roundup Ready soya-based Impossible Burger, financed again by Bill Gates, 14 patents. If Monsanto had 1 patent on GMO soya, making fake food out of bad soya, while attacking indigenous people for eating wildlife. If you notice, we know that COVID came out of, all infectious diseases has come out of invasion of forests. But we also know most research is pointing to the Wuhan lab and work on amplifying functions so that these viruses are more destructive to human beings. But none of that is being addressed. Everything is going, oh, we must ban animals. We must stop indigenous people living with wildlife and sustaining themselves with wildlife. But there's a second aspect to this. Something that I learned in my years and years and years of working on Monsanto and GMOs and Roundup. Monsanto lied and said it's safe and it'll only kill plants because plants have a shikimate pathway. It's wrong to kill plants. But to assume that it only kills plants is also wrong because we are walking biodiversity. We have 100 trillion microbes in our gut and they get killed because many of those microbes have this shikimate pathway. And then you get chronic diseases with pesticides, with Roundup residues, with industrial food. Most of the people who are dying with the COVID destruction are dying because of what they call comorbidities, diabetes, cancer, all a result of this toxic Roundup culture. Now, this toxic Roundup culture materially only began in the 80s and was accelerated 15-fold increase in Roundup use with Roundup Ready soya. But the culture itself has existed since colonialism. Round them up, round up the people, round up their values. And for me, the celebration of today is we were supposed to be exterminated. Our cultures were supposed to be exterminated. Our knowledges were supposed to be exterminated. We are still here. And not only are we still here, that our love for the earth, our love for each other, our refusal to internalize hate and fear will show the path to the future. And why do we need a path to the future? So I've been looking a lot, I've been working on patents, the whole issue of biopiracy. I remember years ago in one of the Canadian universities, some indigenous people had traveled with a beautiful painting, 400 kilometers to gift me this painting on biopiracy of a plant. But piracy can happen either by stealing through a patent or stealing by killing living systems through Roundup. Now, I was talking about TEK as TEK, the Traditional Ecological Knowledge Elders, and the TEK, the TECK, the new robber barons that got created with 20 years of deregulation of commerce. Just like East India Company became so rich with deregulated commerce, we now have these giants, and they want to take over every field. And I want to just mention it because this is so important for our discussion. When you think of Google, I know they were thrown out of Toronto because they were trying to steal data through the Google sidewalk stuff. You know, they literally, you know, I see my books that are out of print and I'm trying to look for it and someone will tell me it's for sale in Google. They steal books from libraries and print it out and then they sell it. So these are thieves, just like the colonialists were thieves. We have tech thieves now. But they're not just tech thieves. They continue the fear of nature. So I was so surprised to find, I read a new patent, and I'm sure the indigenous people have beautiful plants that are iron rich. We have wonderful plants that are iron rich. Why do we have anemia? Because we are spraying to death the iron sources in our diets, whether it's in our agricultural fields or it's in our forests. So now you have anemia. So who would have imagined that Google, who's monopolized data, who's monopolized everything, do you know they've entered into health sciences? 5 years ago, they create a whole life sciences branch, and they call it Verily, which is a medieval word for truth and certainty. 13th century word to colonize the future. 5 years ago, pretending we've never had knowledge of healing, we've never had knowledge of medicinal plants, we've never had knowledge of nutrition and iron sources in our food. But the part that I think is so important for us to reflect on is when the CEO of this new life sciences Google company was asked. And you know, Google has just announced 10 billion in my country. In indigenous languages, they're going to take over all education, they're going to take over all our little stores. But the part that we need to have our indigenous views respond to is, you know, Bacon had said nature's dead. Colonialists had said nature is just raw material and resources to steal. Nature had been turned into dead matter when the earth, as Diana's beautiful prayer showed, all of creation is alive and sacred. Can you imagine that colonizing spirit of a few hundred years ago is still alive for the conquest for the future? And here is the CEO of Google Life Sciences Department or industry. Why did you call it Verily? And guess what he says? Because with our truth, we have to conquer Mother Nature. We have to defeat Mother Nature. Now it's Roundup to me. Roundup as a metaphor is this war against Mother Nature and creation. It is a declaration of conquest through extinction and extermination. And the assumption that you can keep pushing species and cultures to extinction and you will still be alive on Mars just shows arrogance, hubris, and stupidity. And that's why we do need the indigenous dialogue, the indigenous conversations. But before I end, let me just mention 3 things we should be doing. I definitely feel that through these dialogues on the sacred earth, on our place as human beings on this earth, we really create a movement of indigenous people rising and the earth rising. Because the earth is living and she rises. Every time she creates a storm, she's rising. Every time we have a disaster, in effect, it's the earth speaking and saying, wake up, humanity, there's a different way. I don't know how many of you have followed that there is a very big movement that's grown. And recently, a lot of mayors in France who were fighting against glyphosate won on the glyphosate vote. But what's growing with glyphosate is a movement which we took forward in the trial of Monsanto in the Monsanto Tribunal, where we started to talk about ecocide as a crime, crimes against nature, crimes against creation. And of course, the Roundup is a crime against creation. So I personally feel that within the structures of the tribes, an ethical court should be organized on the use of Roundup in the forests as an ecocide crime. That doesn't mean we don't take legal actions in the formal courts. And many cases have been won. Bayer, which bought Monsanto, just tried to find its way out with $10 billion. The courts have said, stop this nonsense. You are liable. There are more than 80,000 cases on cancer in the US. A firm called Baum and Hedlund has done a very, very good job. And I think it would be good for the tech elders and other activists to make connection with these legal firms who have already won. Huge. The final thing I'd like to say is for supporting the tech elders, when I realized we were going to talk, I asked the Navdanya International team to put up the list of all the places where Roundup and glyphosate has been banned. It's available on the Navdanya International website. So if you go to it, you'll be able to find every place where a ban has taken place. And I am absolutely sure it'll help you in keeping your regions and making your regions Roundup free. Roundup free, not just in terms of the toxic material, but let us begin decolonization through Roundup free thinking that all life deserves to live. No one has a right to decide extermination. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vandana Ji. I really appreciate your thoughts on that. Diane, I'm going to give you a few minutes to just reflect on both of what you've heard from Sue and then Vandana, and then I want to open up the floor just to the three of you to engage either in the conversation that was getting underway before we started or to pick up on each other's thoughts. So Diane, a few minutes, and then I'm going to just let the conversation flow. I'll interject as required.
Hey, thank you so much, Jody, and thank you to Vandana Ji for inspiring us with that fire of your spirit for the love and the healing of Mother Earth that you carry so well. Grateful to have this opportunity to join you and to uphold Sue Chiblow and the elders, the TEK elders, all the work that they've done. They have never given up. No matter what comes their way, they never give up. And I think that's where the real source of power lies, is believing in what the Creator gave us and never giving up, because the Creator is watching us. Did we take every opportunity to do the work? So let me just say, we are living in a time of the fulfillment of prophecy. This is the time when the Creator is watching us in every thought, behavior, and action to say, where are these human beings standing? Are they standing on the side of life and the continuance of life, or are they using Mother Earth as a warehouse? So this is something that I want to share with you that came from a ceremony in our longhouse at midwinter time. Our gatekeepers stood up and they gave us a really important message. They said, this from 2019 to January of 2019 to January of 2020, we have prayed about everything that has evolved in that cycle of life. And so we find ourselves here in January of 2020. And there's a message that we want to share with you as the people, and that this year will be unlike all other years. This year will show us that there are going to be miracles upon miracles. And I think that's an important concept for all of us to remember right across the board, because we didn't know what that really meant. And here we are, like in Canada on March the 11th, a pandemic announced that then changes everything in our lives for forever. And so what we are mindful of is that this is a time when we need to examine, as human beings, unity. We need to examine how we are defending the earth, and we need to examine the sources of our spiritual power. And I'll give you an example of how that is important. When the Ktunaxa people in southern British Columbia went to court in their province and then went to the Supreme Court of Canada to present their case. They have a sacred mountain. It's where the grizzly bears roam. And so if you know anything about grizzly bears, which I didn't, but I know now, that they move east-west and north-south. And they do that because they want their genetics to mix. They don't ever want it to stagnate. So they move north-south and they also move east-west. But there's also in that movement of that cross, a center area. The Ktunaxa people's mountain was that central area. And for their ceremonies, they call the spirit of the grizzly bear down from the mountain to join them in their ceremonies. And they feasted and helped that grizzly bear. So when Glacier International wanted to put a gigantic ski resort there with thousands and thousands of units where people could come and stay, restaurants, hotels, ski runs, the people who are the Ktunaxa Nation, said, no, this is our sacred mountain. Went to the Supreme Court of Canada and the Ktunaxa lost there. It was devastating when they lost. However, I want to share this with you. As that court case was proceeding through the Supreme Court of Canada, we had our midwinter ceremonies in the Longhouse. And across the Longhouse from where our clans sit the Bear Clan. I took a large offering of our sacred tobacco and I walked across to the clan mother of the Bear Clan. And I gave her that tobacco and I told her what was happening to the spirit of the grizzly bear in that mountain. And I asked her to pray for the land, the mountain, and the nation that was defending their spirituality, their ceremonies, their sacred mountain, and against development that would destroy that entire area. She then immediately went into a ceremony with all of the chiefs, all of the clan mothers, all of the faith keepers, and we burned tobacco and all of the people prayed. And what happened was about a year later, the Ktunaxa people got enough money together from various sources, including their own sources, to purchase that area. And it is forever held now as their sacred mountain. So, what I want to say is that I believe the Creator was watching each and every one of us. What are you going to do when you're up against the wall? What are the steps you're going to take? Are you going to walk away in defeat, or are you going to keep pushing through? That's why these TEK elders are so important to me. They keep on pushing through. And so we need to share now the understanding as Indigenous peoples throughout the world of our true relationship with the land. My understanding of that relationship is not only are we speakers for the land and defenders of the land, but what we are and all of our ceremonies, every single ceremony that has been given to our people has been given to us by the Creator. Every one of those ceremonies has power. And because it has power, when we initiate those ceremonies, the effect of the ceremony is to energize the land. It's to boost creation. It's to acknowledge creation of the plants, the animals, the rains, the great waters upon the earth, the soils, the smallest microbes. It's to understand that all of those things have a life force. They have a power that is greater than any human power. So we're truly standing on a precipice now. And as Indigenous knowledge holders and spiritual leaders, we have to understand that we have a role to play in sharing Indigenous knowledge with our relatives throughout the world, and in the kind of meeting that Vandana Ji is talking about. But we also have a sacred duty to keep those ceremonies going and keep them really strong and never give up, that we understand what is the true meaning of the land, that it is a living, sacred entity. It is not a warehouse. that we need to unify, to keep our messages out there, because I will tell you that in ceremony, I asked a question. I said, you know, Creator, this is getting to be really tough work now. We're coming to the precipice of where human beings actually have the power to determine if life will continue or not. With nuclear, you know, the nuclear bomb and the pollution that we're creating, the fact that, you know, in lobster larvae and eggs, you know, what's happening is that microplastics are being found in lobster eggs in the ocean. Like, what is it more of a wake-up call that you need to understand that we have created pollution at every level on the planet? So now we have a choice. We need to unify, because the people of the world are waiting for us. We are at the tipping point now. We are no longer in the minority, by the way. We, as Indigenous people, and the messages of Indigenous people, that period is over. We are now in the majority. And you can see that majority consciousness rising by the anti-racism, anti-oppression movement throughout the world, because it's not just our people at the front lines anymore. It's the children and the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren of white people. People of the world know there needs to be a change. And I'll tell you who is afraid now. Our people are not afraid of the changes that are coming. Who's afraid? The governments of the world are afraid, because they can see that their empires are collapsing. This little microbe called COVID-19 is bringing the world to its knees. It's destroying economies, it's destroying health systems, it's destroying education systems. That's the miracle that we are seeing this year, is that the smallest microbes have power. And is it negative power? Partly because people are dying and suffering and dying, but it's also regenerative power, because it gives us the opportunity now to self-reflect and to say, where are we going? How will we rebuild? What is it that we say we want when all of this is crumbling around us? The empire is crumbling. What is it that we're going to replace it with? That's why land-based education, land-based economics, land-based health systems are so critically important. We can fill that void with Indigenous knowledge systems and the wisdom of the elders across the face of Mother Earth. We can fill that void. Not to say it's all, the world needs to be Indigenous, but to say Indigenous wisdom can inspire change. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. I thank you for that opportunity.
Oh, thanks, Diane. Sue or Vandana, do you have any reflections on what's been discussed so far? I'm just opening the floor to the three of you now.
Sorry, I was busy quoting Diane on Indigenous wisdom can inspire change. Yeah, you know, we're in a system that obviously is dysfunctional. There are a lot of people that want to see change, a lot of questions on what will fill those what will the new system look like? And but I also think that there's so many opportunities for us to bring our minds together to create what these systems will actually look like. And like Vandana said, you know, living in a world without Roundup, it's so possible. But I really like the idea of the ethical court. I have mentioned to the elders a few times, because I think it was the people, the Passamaquoddy people that are in New Brunswick and Maine. I was told a story one time by Dr. Henry Lickers that there was a woman that was in a situation, an abusive situation, and she had come up back to her community, to live in her community, and the American government had produced some sort of document that they were going to deport her back to this abusive relationship. So the elders of that community got together and wrote to the governments in their language pretty much declaring that no, their laws supersede these laws, and how important that was because she wasn't deported. And so one of the things that, you know, when working with the elders and listening to them all the time is they talk about the importance of our languages and utilizing our languages and how our systems, our knowledge, our laws, our governance structures, how everything is contained within those languages, within our languages. And one of the concepts that was shared with me more recently is called Gwexidon. And when we say Gwexidon, we are saying he or she is changing their behaviors, their way of life to live in a good way. And then if I say it for myself, the word actually changes to Gwexiged. So understanding that, you know, because when I talked with the elders and I was asking them, what is this reconciliation? Like, what does this word actually mean? And when we talked, they spoke in the language for a period of time. And when they were looking at me, they were saying, well, we can't say that in our language. And they talked about how we had a system of what would be called justice, but it wasn't an actual justice concept in the Western science. So I really like this idea of having an ethical court to bring these different criminals to it, to create more of an awareness, because, you know, we can have foods that aren't fake foods, like Vandana said. And one of the the elders, he is a traditional practitioner, and what he's been saying since I've been participating in his ceremonies for years is that we have to return back to the lands. We have to return back to the lands, because if we don't start eating the foods that were given to us, and we have cancer. He talked about how COVID has come about, how there's going to be more diseases that are going to come about, that COVID is just small compared to what actually is going to come if we don't actually start returning back to using our foods and the lands that were given to us. So yeah, I just want to say miigwech to Vandana and Diane for sharing that knowledge. And also too, one of the things that I've noticed is that the importance of women sitting here. This guy, traditional practitioner, he always says too, you know, when women stand up, that is when the change is going to begin. Women have the compassion, we have the knowledge, we have everything. We can give birth, we can carry life. That is the responsibility that we have. And when women stand back up, understanding their responsibility, holding other women up, supporting other women, is when things will start to change. Now, miigwech. Oh.
Thank you so much, Sue. Vandana, do you have any more words? And then I'm going to go to some of the questions that are starting to come in to me through the chat and privately.
It is so clear from all Indigenous wisdom and experience that we have to return to the land. We have to return to the earth. In our minds, in our practice, in our lives. The uprooting of people was necessary to destroy their self-reliance and self-sufficiency and freedom. And most people don't realize that while, you know, our lands were being colonized, India, Canada, America, Africa, people were being taken as slaves from Africa, which is why you have to have a Black Lives Matter. At the same time in England, the enclosure of the commons was removing the peasants from the land. And peasants didn't want to move from the land because it gave them freedom. Land gives us freedom, land gives us identity, land gives us the sense of responsibility that both Diana and Sue have talked about. And that is the reason when I talked about the other tech, the TECK, they've just decided there's going to be no people in agriculture. There will be no one on the land. There will be no food from the land. You'll have digital spraying of poison and Roundup, and lots of digital control of driverless tractors and then it'll all go into factories, like the Impossible Burger factory, and be using energy and all kinds of chemicals to poison us further. That's why, for me, the rising of the indigenous values, knowledge, care, and with it, the awareness that we must return to the land is the beginning of a decolonization. As Diana said, you know, indigenous cultures were pushed to the margins, but are not at the margins. Indigenous cultures is where the wisdom and hope and the seeing the path to the future is coming from, because we have a decade in front of us, either to extinction. You know, IPCC, IPBES, all of them are saying 10 years to change your direction. Otherwise, in 100 years, human beings will destroy the conditions of life on Earth, and human extinction will follow other species that have been pushed to extinction. And I talked about the Roundup as a metaphor of extinction. That's the reason we have to create a 10-year plan. Diverse path, similar values. Unity that Diana talked about, unity in diversity. That is what we must allow to flourish and fill our minds and hearts with a new hope and a new love.
Thank you so much. I have a couple of quick questions that are coming in from the chat, and then we'll go back to a more open format. So one of the Anishinaabe youth is asking, how can common folk, folks in the territory, settler folk, organizations, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, support this work, Sue?
There are a few ways. The TK elders actually have a website, and there is a petition that has been promoted, but also too, there are maps that go out in different newspapers, and you can probably find them on the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry's website, and go occupy the space. If you're a young person, you know, you can take your tent and camp out. It's a little bit harder for the elders to be able to be that mobile. So the young people can occupy that space and set up a camp. Put your ribbon colors up in the tree, you know, do whatever you feel you need to do will help stop them from being in that territory. I hope that's helpful.
Heck yeah. That's really helpful. And I think one of the things that we can't lose sight on that, I'm just going to add to that, Sue, is under COVID, we have 1 in 3 students right now, 1 in 3 people under 25 in Canada is unemployed and unable to go to school physically. We also have the first time since the boomers came into being where the young people outnumber the boomers. And so what that tells me is there's a whole bunch of folks who grew up 100% inside of neoliberalism in this country, for whom the concept of occupation might be very foreign. So storytellers on the call or storytellers in Facebook, you know, reach out. Let's figure out ways that we can encourage young people to safely get to these spaces, to do it in a way that's not bringing risk at all to rural communities. But this invitation, it takes 5 people per cut block. It doesn't take a lot. We don't need thousands of humans, a few humans in every cut block, and this could change. So thank you for that suggestion. Other suggestions from Diane or Vandana Shiva on what folks can do in support of whether it's the tech elders specifically or this conversation more generally?
So, you know, there's ceremonies that are initiated since COVID began at the beginning of March. And I'll just speak about our lodge on the shores of the Grand River. We started our sacred fire, and that fire never goes out. So there's consistent ceremonies there in the morning at 8 a.m. and again at 8 p.m. And, you know, I want to really encourage young people to offer your tobacco, to engage the Creator, to show the Creator where your heart lies in this whole movement. and to ask the Creator for the opportunities you need to be able to make a difference. And then watch for the doorways to open so that you are in various friendship groups, you're finding each other on Facebook, or I don't know how young people work social media today, but Instagram, all of those ways that young people have of connecting, all of the really powerful Indigenous climate action organizations that are underway today. Find a place where your heart feels called, your spirit feels called, join. Use your voice, occupy the space, be active, and know that in every action that you take, you're representing Mother Earth. You're representing the waters, you're representing the plant life, the animal life, all the beings in the air. You're their voice. This is the call for your generation. My generation was different. Our call was different. Our call in my generation was to stabilize the ceremonies for the nations of our people. And the next generation up, which would be my children's generation, their job is to participate in those ceremonies, become strong, understand that, when you raise your own children, that not only are my children are the pillars, like the walls of the lodge, but my grandchildren are the roof of the lodge. When our children and grandchildren fully embrace all of these teachings and all of these life ways that we're talking about, we will have accomplished the return to loving the earth, return to understanding our relationship with creation. And one of the clan mothers told me this. She said, if you want to be truly happy in life, you have to fall in love with creation. If you never fall in love with creation, you will never defend it. So that's how important it is for all the women who are life bearers, life givers, to understand that you're putting medicine into your children, into your grandchildren, and you're putting medicine into your great-grandchildren, because you're creating this continuity of falling in love with Mother Earth, and that is defending her.
Miigwech, Diane. Vandana Ji, did you have something to add?
Yes, I wanted to say that, the rising of the Indigenous vision, knowledge, people, cultures, is basically a positive of the decolonization process. But, we've been so organized in silos over the last few decades. Some people were environmentalists. They weren't bothered about Mother Earth, but they had specialized jobs. And there were jobs. Then there was another group of people who were worried about human rights. Indigenous rights were not even in their horizon. It started to grow. And like you said, today 1 in 3 Canadian youth have lost jobs and education. But the Canada I studied in, everyone was so privileged that you didn't have to have the concern for the rights of the future. But I always see colonialism as colonizing Mother Earth, colonizing diverse Indigenous cultures, and colonizing the future, and basically the possibility of future generations to have a life. And now it's time for all these three to become one movement for protection of life. I think Diana put it so well. Which side are you on? Are you standing on the side of the creativity and continuity of life? Or are you standing on the side of its extinguishing? And I think everywhere, if we get rid of 3 illusions. First, the illusion that we don't need the land. We need the gadgets. Second, the illusion that humans are superior to other species. Third, the illusion that some colonizers are superior to other human beings. You can shed these illusions and suddenly you realize, not only do I have capacity and power, but Indigenous people who were considered backward have the highest wisdom and knowledge to teach us how to live in a world without bringing it to collapse.
Great, thank you so much. I have two more questions. One that's another question of struggle, and then I'm going to end on a more inspiring note in the sense of, and I'm going to ask the three of you so you can start thinking about it a little bit now. The last question is going to be, what has happened in your life? What are the steps you've taken to do this reconnection with land that you're calling to be, so that our viewers can have some direct experience of what that might look like in their lives? Folks who are listening, toy with that conversation and consider answering it for yourselves and each other in the chat. But before we jump to that conversation of inspiration and possibility, one of the Indigenous participants on the call has asked, how do we deal with racism and racial hate when asserting our rights and occupying these spaces? So if we're to take up this invitation to go to a rural space and occupy to stop the glyphosate spraying, inevitably, as we've seen with Kahontakwas Manuel and other frontline workers, there's a new level of open white supremacy that's physically confronting. The land camp folks down at Victoria Park here in Kitchener are also have been for the past week facing this kind of confrontation and discrimination. So Sue and Diane and Vandana Shiva, how can folks deal with this racism and racial hate while asserting their rights and responsibilities?
Well, unfortunately, I think due to the colonized education system, people just don't understand. They've been brainwashed. They don't understand what's actually really going on. They live in their privileged little spaces. But when I've talked with elders about those sorts of things, because even when I was on, I'm sure many of you remember Nokomis Josephine Van Damen and the water walks that she started, and she talked a lot about that racism and people throwing stuff at them when they were walking. And fortunately for me, when I participated in the Mother Earth water walk, the 4-directional water walk, we didn't encounter a lot of that because we're coming through the north and it was pretty rural on the highways. But one of the things that when we talked about that is what a lot of the elders say is that you can only lead by changing yourself. You can't change other people's. You can present them with information, but the old saying says, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make the horse drink the water. So internalizing and leading through example is what I've been told by numerous elders. And then also too, one of the things they talk about is focusing on the little children. A lot of people, even the teenagers, have already been corrupted by the gadgets, as Vandana said, and focusing on working with the little children, and because they don't see color, they don't see the racism, not until they're actually taught that. So working with those kids and getting them to see that, water is alive. You can talk to the water, you can pray to the water, and it can change how your whole entire day is going. So there's those sorts of things that I've been told that I try to use when dealing with all sorts of racism, because it comes from even within our own communities, right? Because we've been colonized, that old crab bucket syndrome. So it is hurtful, but returning back to ceremony and smudging and participating in that and just leading by example.
Miigwech, Sue. Vandana Shiva or Diane?
So I guess I'll go next. So I want to just say for the youth that the prophecies have talked about your coming to this time. They say that a very special group of young people would be born at a time of the change in Mother Earth. That these young people would be born with all the gifts of the ancestors to be visionaries, prophets, healers, great leaders, great speakers. And that our job as elders is to guide them, support them, doctor them when they get sick, keep them on inspired to walk in a good way, free of drugs and alcohol. And that's our job, is to transmit that culture to the young people so that they can fulfill the spiritual mandate with which the Creator sent them to this world with their specific gifts, and with those gifts to create harmony in the world. So they're born at this time period with a lot of power, but that power has to be connected to elders and ceremony in order to activate that power with the moral code that goes along with it. We're seeing now that Indigenous nations are starting to reach out to one another. And I think we have work to do among ourselves. And, you know, one of the things that we're working on is a resurgence, a revitalization of the original relationship between the Anishinaabe Nation and the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, so that we can reactivate our wampum belts of peace and friendship and a good mind, sharing that land, understanding that our resources are for everyone to benefit from equally. So that meeting is coming up in 2022, and we hope that by then it will be a face-to-face meeting. But we as Indigenous people need to do our own work to recover our original relationships with one another. And Indigenous nations in the countries that what we would say over here is Turtle Island, once we come together and it's strong among ourselves, we can only benefit the mindset of the governments that are occupying our homelands to rebalance themselves with a moral and ethical code that is going to help them to understand that when they come here, they're immigrants, they always will be, that they are settlers, that they have a duty and responsibility to support Indigenous nations here in our work to protect the land, to guard the land, to re-energize the land. That's our work as Indigenous nations with our ceremonies, to re-energize the land. But the work of those settlers is to support us so that we can do our best work. They also have duties and responsibilities when they come here. This is not a free ride when you come to Turtle Island, you know, when you live the life that you do in the Americas. This is an opportunity for you to align yourselves with Indigenous nations, support those Indigenous nations. So when the youth talk about, you know, we're going to take this collective action together, you know, how can we be sure that we're going to be safe? The short answer is that none of us are safe. That's the short answer. And so where do you put your faith that the Creator is going to take care of you? The most powerful thing that we have as human beings is not just our faith and ceremony in the Creator and in the life-giving force of Mother Earth, but it's also social media. It's also cameras. The fact that we have this movement that's moving across the face of Mother Earth now for anti-racism and anti-oppression is because we have cameras on it all the time. So we need to make sure that when we have these gatherings of collective action, that we have cameras there. And we have always had within our nations those defensive units. Those defensive units are men that surround us to support us in the journey that we're walking together. So, you know, I really want to thank everybody for listening today and for the depth of this discussion, because I have a sense that this particular discussion is going to travel the face of Mother Earth. And I'm so grateful to Sue and the TEK elders for their continuous love and connection to the land. They never give up. To Vandana Ji for being that warrior for the earth, that supreme warrior for the earth. I'm so grateful to know you. And so I'll stop there and say nyawa for this privilege.
Chibigwach Nyawan, Diane. Vandana Ji, I'm going to jump to the last question and ask you to go first, and then Diane, and we'll finish with Sue. And the question was to just share an inspiring story of returning to the land and steps to get there.
You came to Navdanya for the course we used to call the A to Z of biodiversity, agroecology, and organic food systems. We are now just calling it Return to the Earth. And if this year we can't do it physically because of the lockdown, we're going to do it digitally. For me personally, the return to the land became an imperative when I saw the destruction of chemical agriculture in Punjab or pesticide in Bhopal. And I did studies then on the chemical farming, the violence of the Green Revolution, but took a pledge I was going to turn towards non-violent farming and learn. And I realized the roots were indigenous agriculture. Albert Howard's book, An Agricultural Testament, which is called the Bible of Modern Organic Farming, is basically his learning from Indian peasants. So where did the peasants learn from? From the land. Where did the world learn how to do good farming? Through Howard, from the peasants of India who learned from the land. So if we have to protect life on earth, the first teacher has to be the land. And just this morning, I think I had a call from the city of Barcelona, which is going to be the world capital of sustainable food systems. And they want me to be an ambassador. And then quietly this young woman says, 20 years ago, you taught me. And I get this all the time. People performing amazing roles of leadership, shaping new institutions, carving out new paths. And they will say, I was at Navdanya, I was at A to Z. And which shows us, for me, my hope, where does my hope come from? That one seed gives 1,000 seeds. And all you have to do is protect the seeds and then sow it out and then share it. Just those three actions: saving the seeds of life, growing the seeds of life, and sharing the seeds of life means not only do we keep our knowledge alive, we protect the earth, we grow more food, we get rid of disease, and our cultures regenerate. Because unlike the chemical warfare that began in Hitler's labs and continued then with the roundups, ecological care of the earth comes from the land itself, and therefore has to be very, very diverse. Therefore, we can all learn the same principles, but if the earth's diversity has to regenerate and flourish, if the climate could, for the young people who are panicking about climate change, all our work in Navdanya has shown, but it's totally possible to reverse it by healing the broken cycle. Because climate change is a rupture of broken cycles of nitrogen and carbon. We can heal the cycles, take care of the earth, regenerate the soil, the water, the biodiversity, and we get rid of poisons. We become Roundup free and poison free. All this is totally doable. And this is what I said is our work for the next decade. I have always talked about Earth democracy. The moment for Earth democracy is now.
Yeah.
Either we'll have Earth democracy or we'll have extinction.
Oh, Diane?
I love that. Earth democracy or extinction. It's a polarity, and as much as we have populism, there's this polarity. You have to decide now where you're going to stand. So my return to the land was really through ceremonies for my own personal healing. And that's where I understood that there are two dimensions. One is a spiritual dimension and one is the dimension of the natural world. So my connection to spirit became through the ceremonies of my own people and within the Haudenosaunee Confederacy in the Longhouse, the chiefs, the clan mothers, the faith keepers, and the teachings here, also supported by Anishinaabe Nation teachings and also supported by Lakota teachings and Sundance. So really grateful for all of my teachers and the ceremonies that they provided for me. I also want to say that my return to the land was to learn the language of spirit, which is a universal language for every single human being. If you understand the language of spirit in whatever faith tradition that you come from, whatever culture, whatever place on the land that you have, if you can speak that language of spirit to the plants, to the air, the winds, the waters, then you have a connection to the land that can never be broken. And that language of spirit is what connects you to the next generation of your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren. That's what we're aiming for. Understand the sacredness of life to preserve life. Thank you. Nyawa.
So Sue?
Yeah, one of the things I first wanted to say real quickly is that I remember, I think it might have been Jim Dumont, or it may have been somebody else, but he talked about in the creation story on how the Anishinaabe people were put here on this land, and that we were given those gifts. We stopped the 4 times, and one of the gifts that we were given was that direct line, that communication line to the Creator. And then another elder has talked about, you know, when the settlers came here and how they took our children and they took our land. They tried to extinguish us pretty much as a people. But one thing that they can never take from us is our spirituality. They can take everything else, but we still have that connection to that spirituality that can't be taken. As for returning to the land, I don't know if I've ever really left. I was raised in an area where I now live is between 2 river systems. And as a young child, I just had this connection with the water. I didn't understand it. I just knew I could be by it. It was healing. It was a place of tranquility. But for me, one of the stories that I really want to share is that I have a grandson who is now 10, but of course, you know, in his younger years, even though he's still very young, he didn't want to go to school because he finds it boring and, you know, they make you write this and make you write that. So every now and then I would say, well, if you don't want to go to school, you can come to bush school with me. So I've been working with an elder, Joe Jones, who's also a trapper. And so we took him out with us. And his name is his name is Sunganima, but his English name is Phoenix. And we took him out trapping with us. And he was the one that was able to put his hand into the hole and pull that muskrat out. And the joy on his face of having that muskrat in his hand was, it's priceless. And after we finished on the trapping area, checking all of our traps, we brought that muskrat back to Joe's house, and I taught my grandson how to skin it. And then we skinned it, we talked, and then we cooked it and we ate it. And so that, he talks about that. And he also talks about wanting to be able to go back out because he wants to make a muskrat hat. And you need more than one muskrat for a hat. So, you know, just teaching him that and seeing that in his eyes and in his being is something that, you know, I'll just treasure forever. And then, of course, you know, every time he doesn't want to go to the Western school, he has an opportunity to come to bush school with his Nokum. So, miigwech.
Miigwech. Sue, that was a beautiful story. As much as I personally would love to hang out with the 3 of you kind of for the rest of my life, but for the rest of the day, I recognize that everyone here has other places to be. For Vandana Ji, it's the end of what has probably been yet another full and long day. I just wanted to take one more opportunity on behalf of everyone watching, for the folks who have not watched yet, but who are going to get to continue to enjoy this talk and pull from it in the future. We will be posting it to the Red Table Talks website at Reach Yoga, as well as on the Dangerous Ideas Facebook page. And with permission of the Tech Elders Group, we will also post this discussion to their website so that it can be found in all of these places. We're getting, I'm overwhelmed with conviction. I'm not leaving this conversation with weepiness or any other feeling other than deep conviction to carry these words and this wisdom forward. Chimigwech, Nyawen, Kahontakwas, Sue, and Vandana Ji, again, for all your love and support here. Folks, if folks want to stay, I'm going to leave the chat open and this call open, but our guests are free to leave just in case any of the participants who are on this call want to exchange contact information with each other or find ways forward. I hear from Tori Crest that there's an interest in her work with Idle No More and connecting more deeply with this work at the Tech Elders Group. And Tori, I will reach out to you specifically. If anybody else has any other requests in the Zoom chat, my role in all of this is very much like Sue. I'm a helper and a spider. And Vandana Ji asked me to come along with this conversation with the Tech Elders Group. And I also put up my hand and said, I ain't really doing anything. And so one of my roles here is to support and provide access from other settler descendants to engage this so we're not overwhelming a group of elders with a bunch of outside interests that may not continue on. So if you would like to get involved and your folks who are living outside of Indigenous community, please contact me. Sophie, do you mind throwing my email, my UW email, JAKOBERI, at UW in the chat for me, and we'll leave that up. And opportunity for any final words from the three of you. And otherwise, I'm noticing it's 5 after 11.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
So, and everybody can just open your mics if you want to and just say a hello, goodbye. I'll go to our grid view again so we can all see each other who are watching. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you, everybody.
Twitch, thank you.
Awesome inspiration.
Thanks, everybody. I have to run.
Thanks, Sue. Good to see you.
Yes. Well, hopefully we'll see each other again.
Hope so. Thanks, Jody. You did a great job.
My honor. Thank you.